Hello and welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we're going to be talking about cluster munitions and how they can have an impact on the battlefield, likely primarily targeting civilians. So I am more of an expert on the social and behavioral sciences side of geopolitics, and so things like munition aren't something I would consider myself particularly an expert in. So we're going to start off with looking at Wikipedia. Now, as you probably know, Wikipedia on its own isn't the best of sources. However, it does cite other sources that can be very legitimate sources. And it also, for things that aren't specifically political, it actually is a reasonably decent source of information on those topics. And so let's just take a moment to explore this site and see if it's accurate for cluster munitions, what it tells us about cluster munitions. Okay, so let's see. We have a basic definition here, and we should always define our terms to start off with. So, cluster munition is a form of air-dropped or ground-launched explosive weapon that releases or ejects smaller submunitions. Commonly, this is a cluster bomb that ejects explosive bomblets that are designed to kill personnel and destroy vehicles. So, cluster munition is one of those very self-explanatory terms, and I like that about it. That's probably the only thing I'm going to like about cluster munitions. Is it's a cluster of other types of munitions. So it's a bomb that gives you more little bomblets, a lot of them. Okay, so cluster munitions pose significant risk to civilians both during attacks and afterwards. And part of that is because of unexploded bomblets, which can kill or maim civilians and or unintended targets long after a conflict has ended and are costly to locate and remove. This failure rate ranges from 2% to 40% or more. Okay, so 40% or more, that means it could be at least half of them are unexploded and could explode at any second whenever people walk all over them. We're going to see in a second as well that this is a problem that places like Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia have to deal with even in modern times. We see that 123 states have joined the convention prohibiting cluster munitions because of their detrimental effects on civilians, likely. We're going to skip this. We don't really care. I mean, this is a little bit interesting. Basic cluster bomb consists of a hollow shell and then more than 2,000 submunitions or bomblets contained within it. Wow. For a little bit more. Okay, some of them can start fires. That's their intended purpose. Anti-personnel. So personnel is just another word for people. So these are targeting actual human beings. Anti-tank. Shape charged warheads to pierce the armor of tanks and armored fighting vehicles. Wow, that's pretty intense. I mean, I personally, in terms of tanks, and this is coming from a non-military expert, but I don't view tanks as being overly important in modern warfare. It's a zone of control type of thing, while things like air superiority, anti-air, artillery really seem to be winning the day right now. So tanks, I mean, they can be a source of mobility as well if they're very fast-moving tanks. But for the most part, it really does seem to just be like a really big target. Of course, it matters whether your enemies have like the resources to actually destroy tanks. So if you're doing great power competition, such as United States and Russia, which is really what's happening in Ukraine right now, then tanks are not overly important. Because both sides have the ability to destroy tanks. Now, the fact that Russia has been neutralizing any type of air force that the Ukrainian side could potentially field is making it so tanks are more effective. But on the Ukrainian side, Ukraine really doesn't have much that can uh, that would allow it to field tanks or fight against tanks at this point. They're losing everything. Anti-electrical cluster bombs, though. Okay, meant to destroy electrical. See what else it talks about. Okay, so here's some conflicts where it's been used. I'm really going to focus on a couple here. So, Yugoslavia was a big one for not only cluster munition, but we'll talk about it later, depleted uranium munition. And that was so horrific. The damages, consequences, so horrific. This bomb attack was carried out with two containers, killed 15 civilians, 8 seriously injured, 11 civilians had sustained minor injuries, 120 housing units were damaged, 47 were destroyed, and then 15 cars were damaged. Okay, 23 Serb civilians killed. Wow. See, the thing is, you only use things like cluster munitions when you don't have to pick up after yourself. Like, you're not doing this as a defensive action on your own territory when someone's invading. You're doing this when you want to destroy the country in the long term. I do want to go over, sure it talks about Vietnam somewhere here. History of use, Vietnam War. Okay, that was the big one. During the Vietnam War, of the 260 million cluster bomblets that rained down on Laos between 1964 and 1973, 80 million failed to explode. That's a pretty significant chunk. I mean, that's one third, 1/4-ish. Wow, as of 2009, 7,000 people have been injured or killed by explosives left from the Vietnam War era in the Vietnam Quang. I'm not going to pronounce that. All right. Let's see the source. Okay, interesting. Okay, so I think that's all I wanted to see there. Skip that for now. It's all. See, you can't look at modern day wars because it's just all propaganda on Wikipedia at that point because they're trying to push forward a certain narrative. And so let's just look at what it says about the threat to civilians because hopefully they won't wipe that from the page just because Ukraine got some cluster munitions now. Cluster bombs. While all weapons are dangerous, cluster bombs pose a particular threat to civilians for two reasons. They have a wide area of effect, and they consistently leave behind a large number of unexploded bomblets. So again, what I was talking about, you don't do this on your own territory, and you don't do this on, if you've lost territory, you don't do it on territory you expect to recover. And so the fact that Ukraine is even thinking about using these bombs, these cluster munitions, means that the territory they're using it on is territory they don't expect to get back anytime soon because they would have to be picking up the bomblets, disarming the bomblets, etc., etc. Like, United States didn't care about using it on Laos. Like, they didn't care. Over 100 casualties per year to Laotian civilians as of 2009. So still in 2009. They don't have updated sources here, but still as in 2009, 100 casualties per year happening in Laos from the Vietnam War that happened many decades ago. Okay. 98% of 13,306 recorded cluster munitions casualties that are registered with handicap international are civilians, while 27% are children. 98%. Wow. I mean, maybe there is some reason that I'm not thinking about that non-civilians wouldn't contact Handicap International, but I mean, I would assume that they would also be handicapped as well. Like, are they just not calling them for some reason? But that's shocking. 98%. So 13,000. I mean, pretty much 13,000 people there. are civilians who are handicapped because of cluster munitions. Yeah, the unexploded ordnance. Huh. All right, anything else that we need to look at here? I guess what I would leave you with is what I was saying before, and that is that if you're winning, you don't do this on your own territory. You only use cluster munitions if you don't expect to having to be picking up the bomblets for years to come. And so I would certainly recommend that we look at, is Russia using it? If so, where is Russia using cluster munitions? I haven't seen any evidence that they're actually using cluster munitions. And Ukraine, if they're using cluster munitions, where are they using cluster munitions? Because that's territory that I bet they don't expect to actually get back within the foreseeable future, or hold on to in the foreseeable future. And so keep track of that, because that's going to be the lines. I would imagine if Russia retaliates by using its own cluster munitions, because Russia has a huge stockpile of cluster munitions, I'd imagine they'd use it in the area further west in Ukraine. So the more Ukrainian-speaking areas of the country, because that's area they never plan on actually taking control of. But Ukraine, I'm willing to bet that they're going to use that in places like the Donbass. If Russia makes some progress towards areas like Odessa, I'm sure they will use that in Odessa as well. I mean, we've already seen with burning people alive in buildings in the Odessa area, 2014 and after 2014. So they're fully willing to attack people within those territories. And so I just want you to pay attention going forward to where cluster munition is being used, because that will tell you that the side using that cluster munition doesn't expect to hold on to or get that territory back anytime soon. So thank you for sticking with me for another video. If you like this video, please actually upvote the video. And please subscribe to our channel for more content. We're upgrading things all the time. New webcam, new microphone. We're going to have a content creation studio soon. We're going to have a new computer that will allow us to do more things soon. We're going to have new internet so we can start doing some live streams as well, et cetera, et cetera. So constantly expanding, constantly growing. And thank you for sticking with us. And I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.